Alright guys, this is Mr. K here, and I was going to give you guys a quick review of the carbohydrates in case the student-led notes were lacking in anything, or if you just wanted a quick review. Here it is. This video should probably go 10 or 15 minutes tops, and you can watch it over and over again if you'd like to get your review. Anyway, if you take a picture, or take a look at the pictures, those are all kind of the typical carbs that we all think of when we think of carbohydrates. Anywhere from the simple breads or complex breads and pastas to the simple things like the fruits and the pure sugars. Those are all included in the carbohydrates section. So the first thing I wanted to do was look at what are the jobs that are performed by carbs. Carbs are pretty simple. They are, the big one is that they are used for energy. That is huge. In fact, if you remember from what we did before, you could actually look and talk through the whole C6H12O6, kind of that general glucose. You could add 6 oxygens, and you know it will produce 6 CO2s plus 6 H2Os plus what's called ATP, and it's going to create 36 of them, and we'll go through that later, but this is the currency of energy in your body, and that obviously through cellular respiration is how you get from carb to energy. So that's the biggest thing, is that they use energy or are the main source of energy for most organisms. In fact, if you actually looked in the book and saw this, they actually give you a number as to how many calories you get per gram of carbohydrates, and in this case, for every 1 gram of carb, it equals 4 calories. And we're going to compare that to some of the other ones later, but you're going to see that that's kind of the general number. So there are some, one of the jobs performed. The other main one is that plants are going to use it as structural support. They have this thing called cellulose, which is the plant's version of structure. It's the fiber that when we eat a lot of plant products, it's that fiber that we get, that undigestible stuff that our bodies cannot deal with, it the plants use as support. As far as the chemical structure and the formula, carbohydrate, if you look at the word, it basically means carbon, water. If you look at carbohydrate, so essentially it's going to be carbon and water. It's going to be a ratio for every 1 C, there will be 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. It will always have that ratio. Carbon to water, or carbon to H to O, 1, 2 to 1. And then sort of the general formulas of it, or the general structures, basically when you look at the words, there's the word monomer, which you know from the other day, and polymer. Okay, monomer are the individual pieces, so if you think of them, most of them are going to have that hexagonal shape. That's a monomer. You chain a bunch of them together and you get the polymer. In this case, these would be individual glucoses. Chain enough of them together and that's going to be a starch, or a complex carb. So if we look at the different types, there's going to be both simple and complex. On this slide, I'm going to stick with simple. And the biggest thing to remember about carbs is they are either mono or poly is pretty much the main difference. So with simple, you're going to have, the first topic will be monosaccharides. And again, if you guys look at the words of everything, the word mono means 1. So monosaccharides, or 1 sugars, are essentially going to be things that have 1 carbon ring. And again, if that's the simplified version, but essentially if you were drawing carbon, there's an oxygen, carbon, carbon. This may look familiar from what you guys did on, and then each of these would have H's and OH's coming off of each of these, right? That whole big structure you guys tried to build the other day is glucose. So it's a single ringed or monosaccharide. That's number one on the list. And I'll give you some examples here. If you recognize, these are nicely drawn. This one is glucose. It's that hexagonal shape, just like we are recognizing. And then this one, slightly different, still single ring, it's a little bit smaller. This one is fructose, which comes from a fruit sugar. Again, you don't have to know the specific differences, but know that they are all single ringed. There's a ring there and a ring there. There's also one called galactose. Again, you might recognize the lactose part. Galactose is a milk sugar. It's not a sweet sugar by any means, but it's another type of monosaccharide. Then if I jump to the other type, then I have what are called disaccharides. Disaccharides, again, the word di means two. So these are two-ring things. So you're going to see a ring, depending on what it is, and then it will be bonded to another ring. That's a disaccharide. So two rings versus, so there's one there, and then you have two here. There's an example of taking a glucose and a fructose, so you're adding this to this, and what you're getting is what's called sucrose, or table sugar. You could also, depending on which ones you put together, if you put together two glucoses, it will make what's called maltose, which is a milk or a malt sugar. Or you could take glucose and galactose, and you could put those together, and that will give you lactose, or milk sugar. And then, so those basically cover the simple carbs. And then if you take, so when we start talking about complex carbohydrates, we're talking about carbs that are made up of more than two monosaccharides joined together. So they are not the monosaccharides or the disaccharides. You're getting to larger things now, more complex. So one of them that you'll see every now and then, it's not a super commonly used term, but it's oligosaccharides. And oligio literally means few. So typically it's between 2 to 10 monosaccharides chained together. So you would see, again, pardon my not so good drawings here, but you would see, oof, that's bad. You would see, so right there's 4 of them. So that is a oligosaccharide because it's more than 2, less than 10. And again, probably won't see it a lot, but if it comes up, you'll now at least have an idea as to what it is. But those are one version. The more common version is what we would call a polysaccharide. Again, poly, the word poly means many. So now we're talking about many monosaccharides chained together. Now these are going to be things, again, complex carbohydrates are typically things that you would find in legumes or starchy vegetables, cereals, whole grains, things like that. And typically for polysaccharides, you're going to see kind of a major, I'm going to list 3 of them here. All right, one of them, which is really important to plants, is called cellulose. All right, let me try that again. My writing maybe not so good here. Cellulose, there we go. That is what a plant uses for structure. Then you have general term of starch. That is a storage unit for energy for a plant. And then in animals, you're going to have this thing called glycogen. So this is plant, this is plant, this is animal. Okay? Now, the major difference in the plant versus animal, I can tell you that these two are used for energy. So if you look at a starch, essentially what a starch is going to look like is one long chain of carbohydrates. That's a starch. A glycogen molecule is going to have a chain, but then off of it, it's going to have all these branches. All right? Why is that important? Well, if you are a person who needs to get some energy, say you're going to run a marathon tomorrow, A lot of people do the carbo loading before their big events. Now, if you eat a lot of pasta, starchy pasta type stuff, you have to break this down, but because it's a chain like that, you can only break it down off of the end or that end. So it takes a long time to break that down, 8 to 10 to 12 hours. If you have glycogen, which is basically blood sugar type stuff, this is in your bloodstream, and now if you look at it, you can break it down here and here and here and here, and any of these branches, you can break it down so you can get a lot more instant energy from it, or relatively instant. It goes a lot faster. So, if I jump, this one is showing you what, it's a little better drawing, obviously, and you can read there, this is a polysaccharide called glycogen, right here. You can see all those chains. So when you need to break this thing down, you can break it here, or here, or here, or here. So it's a lot quicker than those big pieces of starch. The chain is super important. You can read here, when these cells have a high demand for glucose, glycogen molecules are broken down. When the demand is low, they absorb glucose from the bloodstream and rebuild the glycogen, which is good. Now, if you have way too much and your reserves are way too big, eventually this glycogen will transfer into fat, which someone will talk about in a day or two to come. Now, here's where we get into the part that I think is giving people a little bit more problem, and there's two different formulas or ways to look at this. There's hydrolysis and there is dehydration synthesis. Now, to keep it fairly simple, they are basically the opposite of each other. The word hydrolysis, hydro, obviously we know means water, and lysis means to break. So if you lyse something, you break it or digest it. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to take something, you're going to add water, and that causes it to break apart. So in this case, it's what they call a decomposition reaction. Essentially, if I keep it real simple here, if I say there's, object A bonded to object B, right? And I want to split those. So what I do is I add water to that situation. The water is going to cause that bond to break, and basically what I get then is A with an H and B with an OH. That water will split the two, but it will give me two separate things. Okay, how does that fit into what we're talking about? That's a simple overview. Let's jump forward, or let me show you this a little bit different here. If I have like a sucrose molecule, okay, it looks like that. Remember, this is the general formula for glucose, but if I draw it like this, right, that is a disaccharide. Oof. Try that again. That is a disaccharide, okay? So what is going to happen is that water, so H2O, is going to get put into the situation. And right where that O is, it will take and it will cut that bond. So that O will take one of those H's. The other piece, right, there's already that H there already. There's the H up there already. That bond where it was to the O is now broken, and now it will take that OH. So when you eat sugars, when you eat disaccharides or polysaccharides, for your body to be able to use that glucose to make this ATP we talked about, you have to break it into its individual parts. That is through hydrolysis. So let me show you a little nicer drawing. So there it is. This is a disaccharide. So this is sucrose. Right? There's that O bond that we talked about right there. Okay? And what we're going to look at then is adding the water. So the water comes in, splits, so the OH goes to there, the H goes to there, and now I have my I have glucose, and I have fructose. that will allow me to digest those and actually use them. So that is hydrolysis. The other version is dehydration synthesis. Dehydration means remove water, and synthesize means to make. So in this case, what will happen is I will take, so again, I could use my A and B example. If this makes sense to you guys, again, I'll have my A, whatever that A is, with an H bonded, and then my B with an OH bonded to it. And I want to make A bond to B plus water that's going to be removed. So I will take those off, and that will give me that bonding. So again, if I want to make it actually fit what we're talking about, I would have that, and that. I remove OH and H as water, and what I get, that H is there, that bond is now open, that O is there, but it will complete that bond. So from two of those, I now have a disaccharide. So again, if I show you a little, it will look something like that. There they are separate. I take out the water, so that water is being drawn out, and there's the bond put together right there. It gives me a disaccharide. Now if this happens over and over and over again, then what it will make is a polysaccharide. In this case, all I did was took glucose plus fructose, and I made sucrose. Alright guys, the only other thing I wanted to mention was just dealing with dietary recommendations. I didn't make a slide for it, but if you basically think about it, approximately 40 to 60% of your total calories should come from carbs, depending on the person and how active they are. Sometimes that's higher because they need more energy. Typically, that equates to about 6 to 11 servings a day. Okay? Beyond that, we already mentioned that 1 gram of carbs equals 4 calories. You can look at the labels, look at that part of your book with the labels, 914 I believe it is, and you can kind of see where you can find it on labels. All right, but that gives you just a basic look at some carbohydrates.